Good evening. Call the meeting to order here on February 9th at 7:32. I believe the minutes were from last week's meeting were posted. I don't think I shared them actually with the crew, so I don't know if anyone, hopefully everyone saw the minutes, but we can at least see if we can approve the minutes. But are there any changes and adjustments to the minutes from January 9th? When we met last.
Well,
okay, then we'll accept the minutes as they're written and move forward. All right, so the agenda, we did send out the agenda, so you all should have received that. Are there any comments from the public or visitors this evening, Jay? Those not on the agenda. So Jay.
I will keep this brief because it will probably tie into discussions that might otherwise organically happen. I'm kind of here in my capacity as ARPA committee chairman and as water and sewer member. We have been talking water and sewer for many, many years with, in one part, the goal of getting affordable housing built. And we have some ideas that have not been brought forward before that Bard Hill and I have been bantering back and forth about. And Virginia, I believe Bard chatted with you recently, so you may already know about that.
oh yes, Bart and I have also been chatting, as you say, about this for a long time.
Right.
So, yeah.
So I at some point, I'd like to chat about we didn't want to leave the housing committee out of the loop because even though water and sewer has a foot in the door, ARPA has a foot in the door, ultimately, it is a housing issue. So at some point during the meeting, there are just a few updates I'd like to kind of bring up and see if you guys have thoughts about.
Yeah, I think actually that might be number 4 on the agenda.
So
Sorry,
consider that added.
Yeah,
And
so future housing projects. Yep, that would be great to talk then. And just on that note, who was it? I just emailed Bard earlier today. Jeff Forward sent me an email on some of the idea or thought that I think Bard had or talked about during maybe a select board meeting or a project, something along those lines. So I think it's all the same thing here. But
Right.
perfect.
It's kind of that if members of the public are looking for what's going on with housing, it would be easier if it was part of this meeting's recording than if it was. They're not going to want to go to the water and sewer committee hearing to find out about housing. So I figured it should be brought up here as well, since it's your topic.
Yeah. So yeah, under item 4, I think that would probably be pretty good to talk about that. Maybe we can learn a little bit more about some of those thoughts.
Gina, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Sorry, I had myself on mute. Hi, I'm Gina Prater, and a Richmond resident, and I haven't submitted my application yet, Mark. I've got a lot going on in a transitional kind of phase right now, but I am interested in housing, and I'll keep coming as long as I can.
Right.
I'll be part of this.
Yes, I've been trying to recruit Gina to the committee. So,
We look forward to getting your letter
Yeah.
of application, Gina. I'm on the select board, so I can say, hey, I already met her. She's great.
Yeah, okay. I love that.
perfect. All right. Any other adjustments or comments from the public? We're good. Okay. We can move on. So I think from last month's meeting, Virginia, I think there were a couple items that you were maybe going to look into. I don't know if you had a chance to, and then talk about, right, we talked last meeting about some ideas as to where can the housing committee have an impact in our community next, like what's the next kind of charge for us. So We'll also talk about future housing committee topics. So, Virginia, turn it over to you if you had anything.
Okay, sure. Well, I can start by talking about the properties question, and that might influence our thinking about what we want to do next. So, the Planning Commission has been thinking about housing for a long time, and the goal, certainly with affordable housing and with supported senior housing, which Bard, who's in that world, explained to me is the SASH program performed by some of the affordable housing people, where elderly people continue to live in their own homes, but they are supported in some way, either financially or in other ways. So it's like a kind of affordable housing, only it's for seniors, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in an affordable housing building or in designated affordable housing units. It can be in people's own homes or in their own apartments, but it is a form of supported housing. So the places, those kinds of supported housing units, either affordable housing or supported senior housing, what they need is they need to be generally on public infrastructure, so water and sewer, and they need to have a walkable village connection or some kind of public transportation. Well, we don't have any public transportation in Richmond, so that's a problem, so it's got to be kind of a walkable connection. So the places that we can extend our water and sewer lines in Richmond are, theoretically, out to the gateway, which we've talked about and has had many ups and downs and is challenging, out to the Furr farm, to the southern end. And so those are pretty much the directions that we could go, or out along Route 2 or Cochrane Road, which you would consider that to be in an easterly direction, I guess, southeasterly direction. So those are really our options for extending the water and sewer lines. So the other option would be to have a significantly sized piece of land already on the water and sewer line, of which the only one that any of us can think of is the 4-acre parcel at between Browns Court and Burnett Court. So up the Jericho Road a little bit, towards the schools, towards School Street, back in there in those neighborhoods, there is a 4-acre field, basically, where the middle school girls play softball. Great dog walking area, so I walked it the other day to see if it was really 4 acres. It seems to be 4 acres, and on the maps, the field itself is about 4 acres. The ravines which surround this parcel all appear to be owned by somebody else. So there's a 4-acre parcel there called the Browns Court Ball Field. And the question there would be, is there room to have a park? Because it's an important park. We don't have many public parks in Richmond. So is there room to have a park and to have some supported housing of some kind? It has the advantages, that parcel, of having water and sewer lines and being walkable to the village. So those are important things. And it's owned by the town. That's good. So theoretically, the town could be involved in having some supported housing there. Bard's conversations with the affordable housing people, Cathedral Square and Champlain Housing, suggest that 30 units is probably the minimum that that is financially possible for them to deal with. There are 2 16-unit affordable housing places in Richmond. One is behind the hardware store, Borden Street, There are 16, 8 duplexes. It's very marginal financially. And the other place is Richmond Terrace, which is on the edge of the Furr property along Huntington Road. Its address is on Thompson Road. That is also 16 units, and it's difficult for them to support it. You need a certain volume. We're not a big enough town like Burlington that can actually require that when you build a multifamily unit building, you can actually be required to put in affordable units. We're just not big enough. The Jolena Court buildings were considered also because they are on water and sewer, and of course they're walkable to the village. And for 2 years, we tried to introduce some affordable housing into that project. The problems there are that the owners of that property, the buttermilk builders, they're not interested at all in having affordable housing. They do not want to sell any of their land, which is the way the affordable housing people really want to do affordable housing, is to own a building and manage it themselves. Buttermilk does not want to sell any of their buildings or their property, which isn't built yet, and they don't want to manage the affordable housing. And they don't really want to have a small number of affordable units that the town would manage. Our former town planner, Revy, felt that the town could manage it. Well, Revy could manage it, but whether we want to involve ourselves in perpetually managing an affordable housing project is unlikely. It's probably beyond our capability, and they don't want it anyway. So we've kind of left the Jolena Court property out of our calculations, but I guess it's still there somewhere if we could figure out a way to interest them in affordable housing. The Furr family farm seems like it has potential, and I have talked to the younger Furrs who now own that property, who say they're willing to have a conversation with the Planning Commission. They are really interested in retaining it as a farm and farming there, not necessarily with animals, but with something, vegetables, Christmas trees. They just want to make it work as a farm. So they are not very eager to have housing on the property, because housing and animals, at least, don't make very good neighbors. So people always say, well, we know we're moving next to a farm, we'll put up with whatever, but people don't put up with whatever. They start complaining about the manure lagoon or the chickens or the cannabis or whatever. They start complaining about it. So it's understandable that they're a little reluctant to do that. We will have a conversation with the Planning Commission at least, and maybe the Housing Committee should be involved in this too, about, the periphery of their property, like up near the Thompson Road property, Richmond Terraces. Is there room up there for another similar kind of either affordable or supported senior housing property? From the focus groups that our housing consultant did, it seemed like there was more interest in supported senior housing than there was in actual true affordable housing. Affordable housing in Richmond doesn't have a lot of strong champions, so it's hard to really keep the ball moving on that. Anyway, so that's the story on the properties, except for the Gateway. We haven't done that yet. In the Gateway is the water and sewer question. And it is possible the Reeps, who own the Willis Farm property, which is about 10 acres, have said that they are interested in having some housing. They have not been really interested in having affordable housing. We don't really know about supported senior housing, and if they would be willing to do that in exchange, let's say, for water and sewer, as part of the cost being borne of a water and sewer line. There are many wrinkles to the water and sewer question. It would, the line would probably have to come down the Jericho Road. There are questions about the easement that they hold across the land trust property, but that is being discussed by the land trust. Whether more properties, you know, the goal would be to have it supply a wastewater line, supply the Willis Farm, and also the other properties in the gateway. The zoning for the gateway that the Planning Commission has just approved and will be shortly forwarded to the Select Board has put in place regulations that would enable more density and the building of more houses in the gateway area. For that to happen, there will have to be a wastewater line that goes beyond the Willis Farm. So how to make that happen is the $640,000 question. So different possibilities have been suggested. Could the Willises pay for a private line, but the ARPA funds, let's say, be used to upgrade that to a public line that would be big enough to supply the other properties? Is that a possibility? There are a variety of questions about it and how the hookups could be achieved if it went to the Willis Farm and then beyond. So the mobile station is going to have its own system. We don't know where they are with that process yet, but we intend to find out if they have already started their septic proposal, which is to bore underneath the highway and locate their septic field under the solar array that is owned by GMP on the other side of the highway. So, you know, it would be useful to know what that's going to cost them if they would tell us, because then we could ask them if they would be willing to contribute that amount, for instance, to a wastewater line going out there. Jay.
So Joy Reed and the mobile owner have talked very recently, as in like the last week and a half. The mobile owner was under the impression that we were still planning on running sewer out there and was very surprised to find out that that plan is currently not going anywhere. So I would take that to mean that they haven't started. Virginia made reference to the easement that the Reeds have across the land trust property. As that easement currently reads, any line constructed across that property cannot then be extended to other property. Now, of course, if the land trust is willing to work with us in that easement, anything's possible. But
We believe they are.
now, so yes, that's if that happens, then various possibilities open up. The REAP's been trying to make this work. As everybody who's ever been to a water and sewer commission, they've been talking for a long time about this. We've been talking with them. The question of using the ARPA money to run the line out there was, as Bard and I eventually realized, the main reason we wanted to run it out there was in hopes that affordable housing and other housing might spring up, but just in hopes. And that's not really hoping for something to happen, spending a lot of money to have it happen. It's not really necessarily all that smart. You really want to have a little bit more in writing than that. Joy Reed, when we said, I don't think we're going to run the line out there, briefly said, okay, well, we'll start talking to the schools again. And I don't think that they are really desperate to run that line. I think they're really hoping to be able to tie into the line along Route 2. The last time,
Who?
Joy Reed.
Oh, you think that she's hoping it will come along Route 2.
Right. Well, that's what she's told me. When I said, when we were chatting the other day, she, and I'm not going to share a private conversation, but briefly, her thought is, oh, I guess we'll build warehouses. And warehouses are not really an awesome way to make a lot of money, but that seems to be their fallback plan if we don't come along with it. So the next step was Bard and I talked to the Richmond County Regional Planning Committee, and they suggested, Joy had asked me and others, if we had a business model where we could make affordable housing work, we'd be interested, but that's not our area of expertise. CCRPC said, why don't you talk to Champlain Housing Trust in Cathedral Square? That's what they do. And we said, point. So Bartis talked to them, and the word we have back from them is that since there's no water and sewer in the ground, they're not going to really be very interested in all the projects on the hopes that we would run water and sewer. It's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of thing. But Brown's Court, since we do own the land, since water and sewer does go up there, Cathedral Square, at least, I already know, would be very interested in having conversations with the town about that. There's nothing in writing, nothing's been sealed, it's just conversations, but that's kind of where things stand. If we had some way of getting a commitment to build affordable housing along Route 2, ARPA money or town money could be spent. The final thing that was discussed at the select board meeting the other night has to do with TIF districts where where you basically say we're going to declare this a district, it's a project, and we're going to get 80% of the tax dollars that are raised by this district to paying back the bond. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns has proposed bill to the legislature that would allow a much smaller area, like on the order of 12 properties, to be considered a TIF district. And that if that bill is not through the legislature, it hasn't even been formally introduced apparently, but we're being encouraged to support it and get some momentum. And if that were to happen, we potentially could help pay for a water and sewer line along Route 2 by declaring it a TIF district and saying not only will the landowners who live there and the property owners who live there, contribute to the repayment of the bond, but also the taxes from the grand list would 80% would go to for it. But that's all just smoke and mirrors right now because there's no law allowing us to do that. But that's another possibility orbiting around out there.
And a couple of additional points is that the affordable housing and the senior supported housing folks aren't very interested in properties that don't have pedestrian access.
Correct.
So this is a problem for the Willis property out in the Gateway. However, they could potentially have a walking path up to School Street. So behind them, up the hill from the Willis farm, just crossing a little bit of the land trust. Now, the land trust would also have to give them an easement for a path, a walking path, but they could, and the schools would have to give them an easement for a path. They could get to School Street, come down Jericho Road, and that would be a connection with the village. It is a little bit longer than on Route 2, but surprisingly, it's not that much longer than on Route 2. So anyway, so that's something that's needed for affordable housing and supported senior housing that makes these vendors more eager to do it, is having a transportation scheme with pedestrian access. The thing about the Browns Court ball court is that since the town owns it, it's very inviting to providers of affordable housing to be donated a piece of land on which to put a building. This makes them super interested in it because, it saves you the cost of buying free land, and paying for affordable housing is marginal at best, always, because you're subsidizing it. So the question is, would the town want to give a piece of land for affordable housing? Is it worth it to people in the town to think, okay, we're giving up a piece of our assets, we're giving away assets for a housing use? Now, it may make planning sense, but you've got to wonder about the political reality of it. It's not as if you're giving it to make money. It's not like you're giving it to a commercial interest who's then going to turn around and make money off this gift. You are giving it for a public benefit, kind of a public benefit. And we do know that there's interest in supported senior housing in Richmond. The affordable housing question is, it makes good planning sense, but you're going to have to sell it to people, as it were, if you are going to give it away. And it would be a smaller park, and it's a nice little piece of land, maybe underutilized, but we don't have that many public pieces of land in Richmond. So we would have to think about the trade-off. with the affordable housing. And, you know, we probably wouldn't be able to sell it to these builders.
Well, there's always a Heinsberg option, have a millionaire donate a very large parcel of land.
Yeah. Yes,
Well,
we're
are those-
always looking for someone to donate a big chunk of land for housing it, you know. They do that sometimes, but
Are there though, I think, big chunks available within the village to do that? I mean, even if someone wanted to, is there land that's on the water to sewer already that would be?
yeah, only those
Yeah.
areas that you could extend it, you know,
Right.
in those 4 directions that you could possibly extend it. Might you even be able to find such a piece of land?
Right.
So,
I believe at the hearings the planning commission held regarding proposed changes to the village zoning, that the residents of the village warmly endorsed infill housing in the village, right, Virginia? I'm being a little sarcastic. It was quite. There was a lot of very vocal opposition.
well, yeah. So the way that shook out was where the districts that we have recently approved for sending to the select board for their public hearing process is the residential commercial districts. So that's up Jericho Road, you know, down Bridge Street, along East and West Main Street. It's mostly along the main arterials. And that was there was much less resistance to any kind of gentle infill in the residential commercial districts. And also in the Gateway area, there was virtually no resistance to infill development out there. In fact, people would like to expand their holdings in buildings out there, but they're held back by the fact that there's no wastewater line. So the place in the village where there was the most resistance to increasing the density or infill was in the neighborhoods. So there are, you know, there's the Baker Street Tilden neighborhood, there's the Pleasant Street neighborhood, Church and Esplanade, and then south of the river. Those neighborhoods are very, very protective of their current density. We have talked to them, and we have it partially, those pieces of the zoning revision partially done. And they have agreed to, for instance, having slightly smaller lot sizes, having slightly more lot coverage. So they're not totally hostile. And I would add the series of articles in 7 days about housing has been very helpful. They were an excellent series of articles. There were 11 or 12 of them, very in-depth about all aspects of the housing crisis that we have and why it's bad for everyone to have a housing crisis and to not have enough housing. That has been helpful in shifting the dynamic a little bit. And so when we come back to talking about the neighborhoods, we hope that we will see actually some movement there. But the residential commercial, the intermixed districts or the mixed use districts have had not so much pushback in terms of increasing the density. So, and we do intend to, you know, work on the density outside of the village question when we get to those districts. The housing needs out there. The problem is we need to protect the farm and forest land. So we need to cluster the housing. It needs to be down near the road. It needs to be out of the wildlife corridors. So that's probably going to be an even bigger challenge than the challenge that we've had with the recent pieces of zoning. But anyway, we're hoping that we don't have a lot of pushback with the gentle infill in these 2 districts, Jay. So, yeah.
Wish you luck. I mean, I personally would love to see it happen, but I'm just one click.
Yeah, well, we have had conversations with the neighborhoods saying that if we have multifamily housing and gentle infill in the residential commercial districts, it is actually helping to protect the neighborhoods, because then at least we have started somewhere, you know, and made some effort to fulfill our share of providing housing in this county.
One thing I should add, and this, I don't even know if this is even remotely even alive. At one point, the folks at Buttermilk reached out to the select board, and June Heston and I met with them. They were basically willing to do a trade. If we would allow them to build even more units, they would agree magnanimously to have a small number of units kept affordable for 10 years, after which they would go to market rate. And we basically did not think much of that offer, and I think it basically died. So that's the extent of their interest as far as I know.
Yep. And really, all the interest in Jolena Court came from Revy in putting any more units there, more affordable units. He felt that that property was very underutilized in terms of density, could support more housing, tried to figure out how to sweeten it for the town by making more affordable units. You know, those were his proposals. They came from him, even though it might seem like Jolena Court was suggesting them. They were plannerly ideas.
Right.
We have not totally given up, and the Planning Commission on our list of topics is to talk about Jolena Court and to say, well, maybe 90 units. They have the potential to have 45 residences in that property right now. They have built 14 residential units in their one building right next to the Richmond Community Kitchen. That building has 14 units. The town has up until now required that the ground floor be commercial space. We want to revisit that. Is it useful for the building in back of the building that exists, the new building they're going to build with the 30 units? Is it useful to require that the ground floor be commercial? Is that, do we have the demand for that kind of commercial space now? Times have changed. Is that a place where people would go to shop in the ground floor? That was kind of a leftover from the interim zoning that foresaw that as a commercial center. Well, it's not, it couldn't be done as a commercial center. Maybe it needs to go all residential. Maybe we need to have 60 units. Maybe we could trade, do some kind of density bonus thing and go to 60 units. We might not want to go to 90 units, which is what Revy had in mind. And we were all kind of shocked to think that you would put 90 units in that small parcel back there. But we might be able to have a few more than 45. We might be able to, arrange some kind of negotiation with them. But
Virginia, if you wouldn't mind, what is the maximum height of a structure that's envisioned in either the commercial residential downtown or for the gateway?
the maximum height?
Yeah.
The maximum height is 35 feet for livable, and that is because that has always been the case in Richmond. We don't have a ladder truck. The firefighters do not want to borrow the ladder truck from Williston, which is what the Regional Planning Commission blithely suggests. They're like, oh, you can go to 45, 50 feet, just borrow the ladder truck from Williston. Our firefighters, they do not want to borrow other people's ladder trucks.
No, I
It
understand.
would immediately be on a list of things they wanted to buy was a ladder truck for Richmond. Do we want to do that? No. So right now we're keeping things at 35 feet because that is the other place you can go for infill is up. Exactly. But it does not seem like there's an appetite for that in Richmond and for the expense of the inevitable request to buy a ladder truck. So the second building of Jolena Court is actually a little higher because it goes below ground. And we've allowed them to put some living spaces below ground. So they actually have 4 stories, but it's not higher than the 35 feet.
I had a question that I think is related back to the gateway topic, because I think, Jay, you mentioned, that the residents of the mobile home park were assuming that the water sewer line would be extended.
The gas station.
The mobile
Oh, okay.
gas station.
The mobile gas station, okay, all right. They were assuming that the line would be extended down to their gas station.
Yeah.
Right. The reason the mobile home review comes up, Peter Brown, who essentially owns that development, had multiple times over the years been involved with the Water and Sewer Commission. He had been up to work, whoever else he would have been interested. We even included tentatively that mobile home park in phase 3 of the water and sewer expansion out there. Then he dropped out. Then the residents got very upset, and we had a very contentious public.
That's what I thought. Yeah, yeah.
They moved to subtract that, and now the proposed district again would just go as far as a mobile station. And as of like 10 days ago, I haven't spoken to him directly, but Joy has. He's apparently thinking, wait, I thought you said sewer's coming out there. They're not. So my assumption is that he has not started the board yet.
Okay, so we need to have a conversation with Tom Frawley about that. Yeah, the long-term, long-standing planning goal has been to have a water and wastewater line that could extend to the mobile home park. Because someday Peter Brown will not be there. Someday they have room to put another 60 plots. Someday their septic system is not going to work for them anymore. And it is our only claim to affordable housing pretty much in Richmond, except for Borden Street and Richmond Terraces. It's a huge asset in terms of affordable housing. We need to protect it. If it's ever going to be owned by the residents, if it's going to be owned by somebody else, we should be able to have a wastewater line out there. It makes no sense not to position ourselves so that we can do that. So
I agree. Totally.
it's, the problem that they don't want it right now is a problem, but we kind of need to be looking to the future somehow and positioning ourselves so that we don't completely cut off that option.
So Jay, where's the holdup right now for the running the water sewer out there? Because I know there was some movement, and then it's
long story short, we've looked at 6 options. Water only, actually never really contemplated water only, sewer only, or sewer and water. And that's of course 2 options. And for each of those options, diameter of the pipe. Water, if we do a 4-inch main, that would supply the properties that are currently there, but it would not allow us to put a hydrant out of the interstate for fire protection. And lots of people have indicated that our fire department indicated it would be very helpful to have a fire hydrant there. But in order to supply that, we'd have to go to 8 or 12. We've run numbers for 30-year bond for the cost of 4, 8, and 12 sewer, 4, 8, and 12 water. And even the most modest workable sewer only plan was still, the bond repayment schedule would still have an average homeowner. We're not even talking about like the Willis Farm, just somebody whose house was out there, would be paying approximately $10,000 a year to retire the bond over 30 years. And that's not tenable. We were hoping to get that funding is based on the fact that we are eligible for and would receive, if we did it, a pair of grants, but it's not enough. And that's where we said, well, right now the project, if we ran sewer only off the mobile, it was going to be about if I recall, 674, somewhere north of 600, but south of 700 to get it out there. And June, and I chatted with Joy in June, and I kind of said, well, if we took half the ARPA money, $600,000, that would, or even 500, 400,000, that would get that bond repayment back to the point where it would not be onerous for the people who live out there. But on the other hand, that's a third to half of the pot of money that was meant to help Richmond as a whole. And the only obvious benefit to Richmond as a whole by doing that would be increasing the grand list. And we did the math, and it would take a very long time for the increase in tax system, increased grand list to basically pay back the money we've shot there. The only way that we figured we could make it work politically, as well as, realistically, would be if we had some kind of commitment for affordable housing. We talked to the REITs. The REITs said, if there's a business model, we'd love to talk. We can't find a business model from the supply one. And that's when we went to CCRPC and they told us to go to People Square and Jimmy Housing Trust. And they said without sidewalk and without water and sewer, it's a non-starter. So unless a millionaire donates a lot of money, or we have a grant comes along that's just like tailor-made for us, we just don't see how to economically make it work.
Jay, do you know, or does the Water and Sewer Commission know how much it would cost for the REAPs to have a private wastewater line from the Jericho Road or wherever the main is to their place? Because, you know, if they're committed to having it, they want to have it for their plans. They want to have wastewater. If they have to pay for it all themselves, how much is that going to be? How, you know, could that money be contributed to the public line, which would also drop the cost of the remainder? So,
Absolutely. I don't know how much it would cost. I do know that they, if I understand correctly, they would have to go back all the way to basically School Street to tie in. They can't just tie on to where the line ends in School Ground.
right, or the Jericho Road. It
Right.
may be that the line ends right at the Jericho Road. So the question is, if they're, and they have stated that they would pay for it on their own, if they will pay for it on their own from Jericho Road, and that's going to cost them $300,000, let's say, then why could that not be contributed to the public line?
Right, if the easement changes, then it makes all kinds of sense. And you've said that they're discussing the easement with the land trust. The previous information we had from a year or so ago was that the land trust was not interested in modifying the easement, but a year is a long time, things can change.
Well, they're, you know, it's currently on their discussion list, so.
Right, and if
And
they,
there,
if
there
they,
are reasons for them to think that it's in their best interest to do that. So,
right, if they called up and said, we will agree to the line running to the reefs and then the town would extend the line, I would probably go over to Wright Preston's house and kiss him on the feet, but, which he would probably kind of agree. But, the point is, it would be wonderful. We've spent so much work. Oh, I haven't even been on the Water and Sewer Commission for 8 years, but for 8 years collectively, we've been pounding our head against the wall. And if we could finally break the logjam, it would be tremendous for the town, I think, to have water. I mean, it makes all kinds of economic sense in the long run, but not as a place to put ARPA money in the short run because it doesn't have that immediate benefit we're looking for. But that would be great if land trust changes their mind. I will be so happy.
So I guess the question is, right, these are some great updates here. How can, you know, I guess from hearing some of the stories, right, there's a lot of like kind of desperate conversations going on, right? A lot of like
always.
chicken and the egg situations here, right? No one wants to move first. How can the housing committee like help support or play a role, if there is one, in these initiatives?
One thing that's always in play is the availability of grants. There's, you know, a universe of grants swirling around out there, and I don't have the skill to find all those grants. That was the kind of thing that Robbie was pretty good about notifying us of. If there are grants that could help move something along, that would help. Also, just, you know, you have ideas about, you've researched, you know, Virginia obviously has invaluable knowledge about what has been tried in the past, about maximum, you know, various ways to stretch land to make it work. Obviously, without a ladder truck, we can't go up as much as we'd like, but you know, we need to see some kind of concept designs to say, can we fit 30 to 60 units on Brown Court Field and still have room left for softball? You know, I don't know if that's an area that y'all are specialized in. I'm not, but if you have been talking to people in that light, you know, we happen to piggyback on those discussions. Mostly, you know, I did not want to have you all finding out secondhand that all these housing discussions are going on and that you have been a part of it. I mean, you obviously, this should be being funneled to the public through your committee, because this committee is the one, if I wanted to know what's going on with housing, I don't expect to go to the Water and Sewer Commission, record a meeting on NMCTV, find that out. So, you know, especially as getting ready to appoint new people to committees, If we can get people who are interested in, I don't know, whatever skills they might bring, just if we can get some energy behind it, looking at ground support or seeing what happens when if the easement changes. There's a lot of possibilities out there. Right now it's very murky, but at least there's a glimmer out there somewhere. We just need to make sure it's a light and not train.
I mean, one thing that the housing committee could do is we could try to compile a list of possibilities with their pros and cons, really try to lay out what the pros and cons of these different possibilities for creating housing and possibly affordable housing. I mean, we know from our housing consultant that a lot of educational work has to be done in order to make it even popular.
I think that's a good point. It needs to be codified and written down instead of just.
Yeah, I think we need a list of what the possibilities are. It's kind of a finite list. And we've already worked, I mean, this committee has worked on the gentle infill question, and we had Brandy Saxton, who was invaluable in providing some material for the recent Planning Commission approvals on the RC districts. So, her multifamily housing standards and her knowledge about really what is currently the standard, like having 3 and 4 unit buildings be a permitted use in districts, that kind of thing, And by the way, a lot of these things that came from her and from Building Better Neighborhoods, the book that we worked from, and are now put into these new districts that are going to the select board for approval, a lot of them are actually being introduced into the state legislature as mandates at the moment. There's the Bongartz bill. There's a couple of bills that are being introduced that are addressing the housing crisis by saying municipalities cannot prevent 3 and 4 unit buildings, basically, from being placed where a single family house or a duplex could be placed. So we kind of feel when we look at the things that we've put into the zoning that we're right on target with what the state is trying to do. And the state hates to mandate things for municipalities to do or not do. They don't want to be doing that, but they find that whatever they've been doing to encourage the building of housing has not been working. So they're going with the mandates. We must remove regulatory barriers. We must not allow municipalities to say that an apartment building is not in the character of the area. We just can't allow municipalities to say that, because the tendency is for them to say that because everybody loves it just the way it is who's already here.
Right.
So, anyway, yeah. Just making a list of the possibilities, I think, fleshing them out, putting together the pros and cons. What are the steps that need to be taken? We need to talk more with the Furrs. We probably need to have a housing committee member, Mark, or somebody in on these discussions when we have discussions.
Right.
Can we get together with the Furr children, the Furr adults, I should.
Furr is on the Water and Sewer Commission, coincidentally. So I'm sure she would be at least receptive to having those discussions.
Who is on the Water and Sewer Commission?
Erin.
Yeah.
Oh, Erin is now on. She must be a new member.
She is. Greg Taylor had committed only through December, and
Yep.
we were extremely fortunate to have Erin. She, as you know, probably is an extraordinary, smart and gifted individual with a lot of knowledge of the history of this town, and we're very lucky to have her. I just want to say also, I'm incredibly pleased by the bills in the legislature. I hope they pass about mandating sensible zoning. I want to throw one other curveball in. Rachel here. I don't know if any of y'all know Rachel. She and her husband sell wonderful Indian food. But Rachel the other night at the ARPA meeting said, well, my mom lives up there. I used to live up there around Brownsport. And if you guys get some momentum behind it, I would beat the bushes to make everybody in the area support it. So Rachel's our ace of hope.
Yes, welcome, Rachel.
And I also live on Borden Street currently, so I am a victim of the housing crisis. We waited like 3 years to move to Richmond, to Borden Street.
Yeah.
So like it's real and there really is a crunch. So like I can be the poster child of like, I grew up in Richmond, can't afford to live here and need a place to live, please. So I'm on the ARPA committee right now, but I watched your last meeting and I was like, I think when I'm done with the ARPA committee, I will be joining the housing committee because I am very passionate about affordable housing because there isn't enough and it's
Right.
frustrating. So
Yeah, and
When is your term up?
I don't, whenever the ARPA committee like
true.
gives out the money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we figured out the money the select board does, but we're expecting to have our report to the select board by May. And the only reason we're waiting for May is because we're waiting on finding out whether we're getting a grant to pay for the Richmond East Main sidewalk project, because that will affect how we think the money should be spent. But as it happens, we're going to be taking letters of application for committees and other town jobs right now for appointment in May. So Rachel, you should go ahead and send a letter in so that, we can go ahead and appoint you. And about the time the architect will be winding up its work, you'd be becoming official here. I think, from what I know of you, you would be a very good member of this committee. I think listening to people like Rachel, if we were to say, let's build on Brown's Court, it's one thing to say we want people who are moving here from Texas and South Carolina to have places to stay. I mean, in philosophically, okay, sure, everybody needs a place to stay. And we've got Richmond-born kids saying, I want to live in my town that I grew up in, and there's no place to live. That swings the political dynamics a little bit in our favor.
yeah, and we used to have Ruth Miller on this committee. And she unfortunately had to get off the committee, but she was also a voice, of someone who was affected by it and who was really glad to live in the Borden Street apartments. So anyway, so as an agenda item sometime, let's start working on that list, maybe Mark, and talk about what the next steps are for each one of those areas. Think about
Yeah,
that.
I think that would be great to put on the agenda for our next meeting, to put that together, and I can maybe start a draft. Maybe Virginia, we could work on that
Yeah,
together between now and then.
Yeah. Sounds good. And the other thing to keep in mind is that, so the Planning Commission had 4 public hearings on these amendments. Now we've approved them. They will go to the Select Board, who has a public hearing process. We don't want to forget that people might come and be opposed to them at that hearing. Our goal on the Planning Commission was to hear all of the viewpoints at our level, at the Planning Commission level. And people did fall away from contesting things over time. We don't know if that they were convinced that what we were doing was a good compromise, but we need to be ready to have people show up or write letters of support at the Select Board level to keep the gentle infill question going that we've been working on. So, and if the package is received by the Select Board in a week or so, it's about ready, but we're thinking about the timing relative to town meeting. And then the hearings will start sometime after town meeting, whenever it gets put on the agenda. There are some fairly complicated issues. So
we don't even know what the select board is going to look like after town meeting, because we've got 2 contested races. And, that we can have a 40% changeover of the select board, and we don't know people's in housing. So I think letters to Front Porch Forum, letters to select board members, advocating on this issue would be very helpful to make it obvious the political wind is blowing in the direction we want it to blow.
yeah, and also in interest in housing to the ARPA committee, saying that this committee has an interest in particular affordable housing, but more housing, supported senior housing, any of these kinds of housing issues, whatever will help with that. Are there some ways of using some of this ARPA money that are beneficial to the town. And, you know, that's part of the educational process, is persuading people that it's not just beneficial to the few people who can get the housing or to the builders of housing. It's really essential for the whole town that we continue to have a diverse population, that we have places for the children of residents to live, that we have places for older people to live who want to, you know, that we have a walkable downtown, because who's going to support the merchants otherwise? You know, all of these things is part of the educational effort that goes into persuading people. So anyway.
So are you saying that the letters are now wanted for ARPA funds, or have you guys pretty much decided,
No,
or
we have decided,
formed your recommendations?
we have the list of recommendations is gelling right now. I'd say that we have a pretty good idea about where we're going to recommend about 2/3 of the money be spent, but that's only 2/3. That we have brooded about, but not in a formal way, what to do with the remaining money. And Jeff Ford, for example, has said, well, anything left over after we've met these needs from, and we have a very long spreadsheet of suggestions from residents, some of which will not work, some of which were very popular, and you know, we have 40 people recommending something. We're trying to work off that list, and we've hit a large percentage of the very popular recommendations, those that were at least financially workable. But we do have that money left over. And so Jeff thought, well, let's spend it on the town center expansion. I'm like, that thing's going to cost like $30 million or whatever. It's a huge amount of money. How much difference? $400,000 is not going to make a lot of difference there, but can make a lot of difference somewhere else. So I'm not going to be like, what the hell? Let's just give it there. If there is a place that has a direct or a benefit to the town of Richmond, that's not the town center, I'm happy to listen to it. Some of the criteria we're looking at are things like, would this benefit all of Richmond or only a small percentage? Would this have long lasting benefits, or is it something that would be gone in 5 years? Does this increase wellness or economic activity? And there's a list of about 9 criteria we're looking at and saying, let's just throw the money to the town center is an option, but I don't think it's the first option. So there is that chunk of money that we're still, you know, we could still go in any number of directions.
Okay. Just looking at the time, I think we should probably move forward in the agenda. Any last comments on some of these ideas that have been floating around? And I think we have a takeaway, which is to compile a list of possibilities, or to more cement this list of possibilities that we have been floating around, and build out the pros and cons. And we can continue that work maybe next week or next month.
Sounds good.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
One idea that I've had, I don't know if it's feasible either with the ARPA money or with other money, but are there pieces of land that could be bought and then given to the town? Like, you know, pieces of land that are for sale around town that, like, I don't even know if this would legally be okay with the ARPA money, but like, if say there's a like 3-acre piece of land on Cochrane Road that like the ARPA money could buy for $250,000 and then give to the town, or like actually it'd be bought by the town, right? So it would be town owned, and then it could be given to Champlain Housing. Like, rather than trying to negotiate with the people who don't really want to do, you know, things in there, I just, as an idea and a question, if like $300,000 could be used to buy a parcel of land, is there a parcel of land out there that would work? That, I guess that's the question.
I have no idea, but I figured Rachel mentioned at the ARPA meeting. I don't know who is really in touch with pieces of land that are for sale or could be for sale. Virginia, you know everything. Do you have any idea?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, no. So, but it should be something that we could find out. You know, it would be helpful if we had a planner, which we are currently lacking at the moment, is any kind of staff, is any kind of planning staff. But as far as I know, Jay, there's no restriction on the ARPA money being used to finance the purchase of land.
No, this would be fine.
Yeah. So, you know, that would certainly move, it would take the will of the townspeople to want affordable housing, and there's the whole discussion that we've had over and over again about the difference between affordable housing and just housing that you can afford, and what those differences are, and is it affordable housing we want, or just housing that's cheaper than it is now? Or anyway, I think it's a possibility that the town could buy a piece of land if we felt if enough people felt it was a good goal, and that we could talk Champlain housing into, 30 plus units on this piece of housing, on this piece of land. I think there's no barriers to that. It's just making it happen and finding the piece of land. There aren't that many pieces of land right on the water and sewer line that fit that bill, but I think there are a couple. Whether they're for sale or not is unlikely. Whether they could be persuaded to sell them, this is where you need somebody who's really a champion of this and goes after it and persuades people to sell them this piece of land because it's a good goal. And, most of us have sort of limited time to do this work. So anyway, yep, an idea worth thinking about. We'll put it on our list.
Great. Well, let's move on. I think that the next piece of business that I did want to talk about tonight was the recruitment of new members. So right now, this is a committee of 3 folks. We have a couple of guests here tonight. And I know this has been a topic on the past couple meetings, but wanted to maybe kind of briefly talk about, we've had some names floated around. I've talked to some folks, one woman who's a neighbor who used to work for, is it Evernorth, but their predecessor before I don't remember what the name of that organization was. So has a lot of experience in building projects that were for affordable housing. She's not directly interested, but was going to ask some other folks in town if they would be interested in joining the housing committee. I know Gina, we've talked. Rachel, if you have interest later, that would be great. But also, like, what kind of role, like, who do we want with a certain skill set on this committee? And maybe starting from there to help, and then trying to identify some folks that might fill that skill set. So, I'm thinking folks that know the affordable housing arena would be helpful. Jay, like you mentioned, having folks that, is there anyone on the team or on the committee that has design skills that could put something together, right? Like, we want to look at designers or architects. So didn't know if others had some ideas as to who might be good in terms of their role, knowledge, skill set. We want developers who know the business and know, like, the ins and outs of what's feasible and what's not feasible in terms of housing.
Well, we had a great set of folks in the beginning of this committee. We had 9 people on this committee. We had a real estate guy. We had a builder. We had Miranda Lascazi, who's in the affordable housing sector.
You had my wife.
We had a planner. We had your wife. I mean, who does something with numbers, I think.
She works at the Burlington Housing Authority, so she is
Okay.
good.
Yeah, so we had people with great skills. For some reason, we couldn't hold on to them. I don't know why, and we declined to really try to look into that because it probably isn't helpful, and most people have too much to do. The 2 people I was going to talk to, Katie Mather, has too much to do. She's doing 14 other things, and Christy Witter's husband just had open heart surgery, so she's not doing anything. So those 2 are not involved. You know, I would love to have Molly Dugan, who's in the affordable housing world, or Miranda back to this committee.
Has Molly been on the committee before?
No,
Well, she's also on ARPA, and since ARPA is gonna be winding down, maybe she would be open to this.
yeah. Although, you know, she deals with this stuff during the day. I don't know if you want to do the same thing during the day on your committees, but we could certainly ask her personally. She knows we exist and she has come to our hearings at the Planning Commission and spoken up for affordable housing, but so I don't know. Keep looking, I guess, Mark. I mean,
Yep.
you know, we've got two good recruits right here, though. I'm thinking that we're going to get a little bigger.
So I have a suggestion. I
Yes.
know it's hard to find people with the experience and the background that's needed from all the different areas, but what about like training, just training, taking the people you have and then getting some training for them. Like I would be really interested to know more about affordable housing. I'm a teacher, I learn quickly, but I just, I'd be willing to learn or do what I needed to do and then come back with that information. But it's not, my background is teaching and social work. It's not really.
Yeah. I think we just need people who are interested, frankly. I mean, it would be great to have all those other skills, but the thing we need is people who are interested and who want to come and who want to do something in this field. So, and there are trainings out there. And Mark, I think, is going to talk to us about the housing convening workshop that there were. There are other trainings that we can find for people. And so,
Yeah, do you know if CCRCP has any, or PC has any training
in
um,
how,
for folks on housing committees or in general, like, I'm thinking like planning commission staff, et cetera, like, what is out there? And I think there was one earlier meeting where we talked, or maybe that was a Brandy suggestion, was, what is the training of folks that are coming onto the committees in Richmond?
Yeah. She was focused. Oh, go ahead, Jay.
I was just gonna say, on this, I'm gonna put this in the chat, the CCRPC has a whole section of their website dedicated to this issue. And I mean, if you don't mind reading a whole bunch of stuff, it's good stuff. It just, there's a lot of it. But I just put the URL in the chat.
Yeah, they have this Building Homes Together enterprise that they're engaged in that is really focused on housing. And I'm sure that we can come up with some very specific things that are about housing. I mean, they do have an upcoming training for just knowing what the regulations are. And, it's for lay people as well as like new planners, new DRB, new zoning administrators, just to kind of understand what the regulations are. There's a lot of pieces to the affordable housing situation. Like we've just been working on this regulatory piece on the Planning Commission. That's only one aspect of it. We have had Miranda Lascazzi talk to us. We could have her come back. I would like to have her maybe come back and talk some more. She's knowledgeable, and we'll talk about how the incredibly complicated financing of affordable housing works. And, maybe we could have some specific questions like, what exactly would you be looking for in a project? What would cause you to adopt a project? We kind of already know it has to have pedestrian access, it has to have water and sewer, but if we could maybe, especially if we were looking at either the Browns Court ball field or a new property that we might purchase, what exactly would attract them to that? Does it have the right requirements? What requirements could we give it that would make it more appealing, et cetera? So let's have her come sometime and talk to us. I think she'd do that, even though she can't keep coming to the meetings.
For sure. Okay. Well, just keep continuing to talk about the housing committee to friends, acquaintances, folks to bump into. We're always looking for new members, so we'll leave that there. Next, the CCRPC convening. So this happened on January 30th in the evening. It's the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission that provides support, but then you probably explain this better, provides support to the planning commissions in Chittenden County. So I believe there are some like hours that we get here in Richmond from the planning commission, right, for some of their support as part of that. And you can, I think, contract pay them to help provide some additional support. But they had a housing commission convening, which was really a number of representatives from the housing committees, housing boards, et cetera, from around Chittenden County. So everyone from Burlington had representation, South Burlington, Jericho, Heinsberg. There's some folks from Essex there, et cetera. So I did share the recording of that out with the team. Rachel, I'm happy to pass that on to you if you are interested at all. You want that on that in the email. I guess two things, they had the Burlington Housing, it's not a housing authority, the Burlington Housing Code Enforcement come and talk about their recent rental inspections program. So how they are all rental units in Burlington need to be inspected, and there's a certain time frame for that, timeline for that. So I didn't think that was super relevant to here in Richmond. I don't think we're quite big enough to have a inspection program for the rental housing units that we have in the area. But they then gave some updates, or had the different housing committees provide some updates on like, what are we doing? What are folks doing in their various communities, various towns on their various housing committees. And it was everything from, again, Burlington, South Burlington, it has some very huge, big projects. Heinsberg, I think working with Habitat for Humanity on a big project, to Jericho, which I think was maybe a little bit more on our par with the smaller community, and trying to figure out what their options are to encourage affordable housing in their community. And I don't think Jericho has any, they don't have any water sewer infrastructure, I don't believe, unlike Richmond, which we have a little bit of a leg up with some of that water sewer infrastructure. So I thought that was interesting, just hearing really that second part of the housing convening about what other groups and organizations are doing. I know, Virginia, you were there. Anything you want to add to the?
Yeah, well, it was just working off what you were saying. It was very clear that there were two different kinds of housing problems in Chittenden County. There's the Burlington, South Burlington, Essex. Their problems are not our problems. Their problems are inspecting the rental units and code enforcement and affordable units within multi-unit buildings and huge projects. When it came to the small towns speaking, our problems are the people who live in our towns don't want this kind of housing here. Like it's really almost like two separate worlds. And we're just starting in even to have multifamily housing. I mean, this zoning that we're passing, hopefully, is the first zoning that's really promoted multifamily housing at all. Well, Burlington is way beyond that. It's way different there. So it was interesting to me, and I want to suggest to the Regional Planning Commission that they have a group of small towns who can talk to each other and not have Burlington and Essex and South Burlington, even though we learn a little bit from them. It's often, as Mark said, it's not really relevant. We don't have those kind of problems. We have a different problem, which is moving to the next stage. So anyway, I haven't done that yet, but I do plan to. I'm the on the PAC committee. Revi left me. I was the alternate, and now I'm the representative going to the Regional Planning Commission. And I would like to suggest to them that their next housing convening, we have breakout groups or something, or we have a whole separate program that the small towns can talk with each other. You know, how do we get this housing in our town? How do we take our fair share? Williston is kind of moved over to the big side. Heinsberg is kind of in the middle. It's more on our little side, but they've got some features that we don't have. They're about our size, but they have more land. Anyway, it's complicated, but anyway, so it's useful. They have regular meetings of this housing group, and this Building Homes Together campaign that they have a person who's in charge of. So we should keep in touch with them.
Is that Taylor?
Well, Taylor is a senior planner. I'm not sure that he's really in charge of the housing portion,
Okay.
but he would
But
be someone to keep.
Yeah, at the bottom of the CRPC page about housing, Taylor's name is right there as a contact, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a senior planner. He's sort of been moved up when Regina left. So either him, Daryl Shibler is a good person to stay in touch with too, because he was in Essex for 5 years and he dealt with on a practical level with these problems. So both of those people are good people to talk to. And we have them available. We have 12 hours a month or something of free services and we have it in our budget. We have not spent our planning and zoning budget, so we can ask them things, but we just need to, in order to get them to help you, you have to be fairly specific about what it is you ask them or what you want from them. You know, you can't just say, could you help us write our zoning ordinance? They don't do that kind of thing well, in my experience. So.
Great. Yeah. So I saw from Connie a few minutes before we're wrapping up here. Any additional updates you want to share from the Planning Commission? Virginia, it sounded like
I think I shared it already. Yep.
Okay.
Just stay posted as to when the select board is going to start having their public hearings about this, and be ready to, you know, I mean, I will send you all the material that you need
Okay.
when I send it out to the select board, and just, you know, be ready to be supportive at that point.
Great. Perfect. So the last order of business that I had on here, the last time we met, we had talked about moving this meeting up to 7. My daughter just joined Scouts, which happens to be on Thursday nights from 6 to 7. So I can run home from there to start this at 7:30. Hence why I asked to move it back to 7:30. I am open to finding another night. Would it work to either move to stay with 7:30 or find another night and maybe start at 7? Which could be a little bit earlier in folks' evenings. I don't know, Virginia or Connie, if either of you have any thoughts on that. Gina, if you're close to joining, welcome your thoughts as well. Or Rachel, if there's a more convenient night that would encourage you to join sooner, then we're happy to look at that.
I'm open to whatever. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, Tuesday would be okay for me. That would be the other night that would work for me. 7 or 7:30 on either of those nights is fine.
After the ARPA committee is over, Tuesdays will be free for me. So, yeah, but I probably won't be free until May anyways, just because I'm taking 2 classes right now. So I won't have much time until May when everything is done.
That's great. Connie, any additional thoughts from you?
I could do Tuesday nights as well as Thursday nights, and 7 works, as well as 7:30.
I mean, if 7:30 on Thursdays works, we don't have to change it. We had talked about potentially doing it earlier. So if we're happy with where we are at 7:30, then I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Okay.
so let's take a look at the calendar.
Connie, did you
Uh,
have you have a conflict on some Thursday nights, right? With
I-
the racial equity?
Not racial equity, but with the Our Community Cares Camp.
Oh, okay.
But they make their meetings 1 month at a time. And I see that we're currently scheduled for March 9th, which is a Thursday at 7:30. Should we keep that?
It's fine with
Yeah,
me.
I mean, I think, well, and then we should have March 9th. Yes, it is February, March 9th. Yep,
All right.
that works fine.
And is it going to be remote? Because we can now have them all remote again. They
Yeah.
passed the new legislation and we can meet remotely entirely if we wish.
Yes, I prefer the remote work or the remote option. So if that's good with everybody else, I'm fine with that.
Yes.
We'll keep it remote.
All right.
Meet here March 9th, which is the next Thursday.
Agenda items that you want to make sure you want to include.
Yes, we'll talk about the compiling that list of potential possibilities in the community for affordable housing, additional housing. And I can work with maybe Virginia. We can get some of that started between now and then.
Hmm.
And I think that could probably take up most of the.
That'd be great.
most of the
Thank you,
discussion.
Mark.
Yep. All right. Any other business?
Just curious, Virginia, any updates on getting a new planner?
No, not really. We did interview 2 candidates. One was suitable and we looked into his references and I believe Josh offered him the job and he had to go suddenly to Nigeria for a family emergency. That's the last I've heard. So he would
Wow.
be okay, but it's been a couple of weeks now that he's had to go to this family emergency, which is making me think that maybe he isn't entirely interested. So we may have to re-advertise it. Josh may have to re-advertise it.
Got
So
it.
we had very little response. We had 3 applicants, 2 of whom were not qualified. One was qualified.
Got it.
So,
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks for the update.
yep.
All right, I'm good. Thank you. And
Any
thank
other-
you, Mark, for
Any
adjourning.
other business correspondence? Anything else? Great.
Good for now.
So I say we can close out the housing committee here at 8:54 on the 9th. So thank you all. Appreciate
Great.
it. Yeah,
Thank you,
Rachel,
Mark.
hopefully we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks
Yes.
for joining.
Thanks, Gina and Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here. We appreciate it.
Yes. Thanks for your interest. That's great. So,
Take care. Good night.
Bye.
you as well, Connie.